愛と勇気の RPG が始まる。この星を救えますか？この愛が守れますか？スターオーシャンセカンドストーリー、エニックス。
The science fiction JRPG, quite the rare, elusive specimen, but one that does exist, just in small quantity. Some notable examples include the Phantasy Star series, the Xenosaga series, and of course, the topic of this video, the Star Ocean series. While the former two were excellent in their own right, I've always been particularly partial towards Star Ocean. A lot of this probably has to do with the fact that Star Ocean: The Second Story was one of the first RPGs I ever played and one of my favorite RPGs of all time. Even still though, there are a lot of unique elements that make Star Ocean stand out and give the series its own identity. The most obvious being action RPG combat mixed with more traditional JRPG exploration, something that JRPGs did not do at the time besides the Tales of series, which I'll go into a little more detail on why that is later. Next, there were optional characters exclusive to specific playthroughs. This means that if you want to play as every single character the game has to offer, better set aside a good chunk of time, bucko, as you're gonna have to play through it multiple times. The series is also known for its robust, complex item creation system, and the private action system. How these are implemented does vary from game to game, but basically, they're extra cutscenes and dialogue that give additional character development. Oh, and let's not forget the immersive, imaginative, sci-fi, fantasy setting. It's definitely not hard sci-fi, as a common complaint is that for a series called Star Ocean, the actual sci-fi elements are a little light. But still, most JRPGs are strictly fantasy only, so even having a little bit of sci-fi mixed in was pretty cool. All in all, the Star Ocean franchise definitely has a lot of original aspects that set it apart. However, despite how unique some gameplay mechanics are along with how cool the premise is, reception to the series has always been a little mixed. Some titles like Star Ocean 2 are considered to be a classic within the genre, whereas some others, a lot of people could honestly give two shits about and try to pretend that they don't even exist. So, what are the entries that are and are not worth checking out? Well, ultimately, that's up to you to decide, but this video will be a basic overview of the entire series, spin-offs and ports included, to try to help you reach that decision. Naturally, I will be injecting my own opinions on the games, however, I'll do my best to remain fairly objective when going over each entry's pros and cons, as well as state the general fan consensus. For those that have been playing Star Ocean: The Divine Force and have been curious to dive deeper into the series, this is the perfect video for you. With that said, let's waste no more of your time and just dive into the meat of the video. The first game in the Star Ocean series was, well, Star Ocean, naturally, and was released on July 19th, 1996 for the Super Famicom. It was published by Enix and developed by the company Tri-Ace, which, by the way, also developed every game in this video, so I'm not going to repeat myself each time. Before we talk about the actual title, it's important to note how the game even came to be, as well as the company behind it. I just talked about this in our 30-minute retrospective over the first Star Ocean last week, so I'll do an abbreviated version here. So, a subsidiary of Telenet Japan called the Wolf Team developed the game Tales of Phantasia for the Super Famicom. However, the publisher behind the game, Namco, wanted to change a lot of things about it during the development process. This caused some strife within the Wolf Team and made them want to branch off and form their own team, Tri-Ace, named after three of the aces that left the Wolf Team. Because a lot of the same people that worked on Tales of Phantasia also worked on Star Ocean, there are a lot of similarities between the games. You could almost even say that Tales of Phantasia was sort of like a precursor to the Star Ocean series. This is why the two series are often compared to each other. Alright, with all that said, let's talk about the actual game itself now. This entry did not make it out of Japan, outside of the eventual PSP and Switch remakes that is, but I'll talk about those later. In this first Star Ocean game, you play as Radix, a Felpool from the planet Roke on a galactic quest to find a cure to a petrification disease that's affecting his planet and friends. The Felpools are a recurring race within the series that are basically human, just with some cat-like features like a tail and varying ear shapes. That is one thing I really love about the series. There's so many different races and species that keep your party very diverse. I'm always a big fan of when RPGs do this instead of just having an all-human cast. Despite how interesting this premise is though, I think the game fumbles the execution. The story starts off really strong in the first couple hours and then doesn't pick up again until the final couple hours. The pacing is just all over the place. The interconnected areas over the overworld map was a cool idea in theory, just not implemented very well. There's too much backtracking for my liking that discourages you from doing private actions, which are the only way to properly develop the characters. And combat-wise, the action battle system was really unique for the time, but got pretty repetitive after a while and lacked more strategy than I would have liked. On the positive side, the game looks and sounds absolutely incredible. Thanks to the SDD1 chip, which compresses the game's graphics and sounds, Star Ocean is one of the most technically advanced games on the entire system. It's seriously such a gorgeous title that looks even better than some early PS1 games. The flexible voice driver also allowed for the use of voices during battles, another rare feat for the system. When it comes to the music itself, series composer Motoi Sakuraba does a great job fitting the atmosphere. Overall, while this first Star Ocean was super ambitious and certainly deserves a lot of credit for creating a lot of series staples, in my opinion, ultimately, I think it's a game that looks and sounds better than it actually plays. If you want to hear some more of my detailed thoughts on why I think that is, be sure to check out our retrospective of the game. Anyway, while the game itself was a little rough around the edges, it served as an amazing foundation for the series to build upon. And build upon, the next entry would absolutely do. On May 31st, 1999, Star Ocean: The Second Story would come out for the PlayStation in North America. To put it in simple terms, this game kicks ass. It took everything wrong from the first Star Ocean and improved upon it tenfold. There's an overworld map for one, so pacing alone is already much better. And private actions are also much easier to do because of this, on top of being handled much better in general. The battle system, while still a little spammy and repetitive, was much more fun and engaging overall. The item creation system was more polished and even deeper than its predecessor, and the characters, along with the story, are fleshed out exponentially better this time around. Speaking of characters, I can't forget about the coolest and most unique aspect about this game. There are two main protagonists to play as in Star Ocean: The Second Story. Claude C. Kenny, the son of Ronix from the first Star Ocean, and Raina Lanford, an Expellion from the planet Expel. It cannot be understated just how much more depth this adds to the game. The story doesn't necessarily play out differently as you're still investigating the mystery of the sorcery globe, but you do see it from a different perspective, which gives you new insight to events, as well as extra dialogue you wouldn't have seen otherwise. Not only that, but you get an additional party member exclusive to that character's playthrough. This makes replaying the game as both Claude and Raina absolutely worth it. I'm not typically one to replay a game just because it has multiple main characters, but here, I actually wanted to do so as the differences were substantial enough to me. All the optional party members played a big role with that as well. I hated having to choose between Ashton and Opera and Bowman and Priestess, but it did make me want to replay the game again, so touche, Tri-Ace. With the over 80 possible endings too, replaying is definitely encouraged. Granted, we now have YouTube for that, but still, very cool for the time. By the way, the first Star Ocean actually started the whole multiple endings thing based on hidden character affection levels. I just forgot to mention that earlier. My bad. As if it wasn't obvious enough to tell by the footage, I do also want to point out that the game looks amazing. Those pre-rendered backgrounds are beautiful, and there's just so much detail. I didn't fully appreciate it as a kid, but on subsequent playthroughs as an adult, some environments just had me awestruck. This was only enhanced by the phenomenal music. This might just be my favorite Motoi Sakuraba OST of all time. Each track masterfully fits the scene it's in and really sets a strong atmosphere. The peaceful ambiance of the venerable forest and purest stream will always send a wave of nostalgia rushing over me. All in all, Star Ocean: The Second Story is just a truly outstanding title from top to bottom. It's widely regarded as an all-time classic and generally considered to be the best in the series, an opinion that I also share with Star Ocean 3 coming in a distant second. To me, it's a top 5 PS1 RPG. Yeah, the game is that good and lives up to its reputation. If there's one takeaway to get from this video, it's to play Star Ocean: The Second Story. The game proved to be so popular, it even had a manga and anime made about it. The anime is actually uploaded in full on YouTube, complete with an English dub. Thanks to whoever uploaded this, by the way. Just goes to show how awesome its fans are. With that said, fans would not be the only ones to love this title. The developers themselves did so much they made a sequel to it a couple years later on June 28, 2001. The game was called Star Ocean Blue Sphere and was released for the Game Boy Color. Alas though, it never made it out of Japan, but that didn't stop me from picking up my own copy when I went to Japan a while back. Naturally, this game was always a huge curiosity of mine. It was initially supposed to be released in the West, however, due to it coming out near the end of that system's lifespan, on top of it being one of the largest cartridges for the system, which would have made it a bitch to translate, Enix decided to pass it up and disappoint us English speakers. Oh well, thank God for fan translations. And as I mentioned earlier, Blue Sphere is a direct sequel to the second story and takes place a couple years after the events of that game. Nopper and Ernest's ship crash lands on a planet called Edifice, soon involving the entire gang from the first game, and then it's up to you guys to find the source of the planet's mystery and make your escape. The plot itself isn't bad, but it wasn't as big of a focus as it was in the second story. Blue Sphere is primarily about the gameplay. Like every other entry in the series, battles are played out in real time, however exploration works a bit differently. There are various field actions that can be performed, like jumping and whatnot, allowing you to navigate through levels. It's pretty fun. With the unique gameplay, in addition to it being one of the most gorgeous titles on the entire system, Blue Sphere is absolutely worth checking out. Square Enix would port this to mobile devices in 2009 with the remastered soundtrack along with new graphics. Unfortunately though, that one never got released outside of Japan either. No, yeah, it did get a manga as well, just thought that was worth noting. The next entry in the series, Star Ocean Till the End of Time, would see a North American release on August 31st, 2004 for the PS2. The North American and European versions are actually a director's cut of the original Japanese version with additional content. Until the End of Time takes place 400 years after the events of the second Star Ocean game and has you assuming the role of Fate Line God as he finds himself getting caught up in an intergalactic war. I don't want to go into a lot of detail to avoid spoilers, but let's just say that this game is really infamous for a plot twist that has fans completely torn on how they feel about it. You either love it or you hate it. There really is no in between. Outside of this though, Till the End of Time offers a lot of usual staples of the series. Optional characters that you can't get all in one playthrough? Check. An action battle system with a lot of depth? Check. A super deep item creation system? Check. Multiple endings? Check. A strong sci-fi opening followed by medieval fantasy for the next 80% of the game? Unfortunately, check. There's also no overworld map or fast travel in this game, so that kinda sucks. Though I did like how it rewarded you for exploring every inch of the map and getting 100%. This made exploration fun in its own way. On the topic of exploration, private actions were also handled differently. You no longer have to press a button entering town to trigger them. They happen automatically, assuming you talk to the right person or go to the right place. Graphically, the game looks great, and music-wise, Motoi Sakuraba does his thing. Every Star Ocean game looks and sounds amazing, and Till the End of Time is no exception. Another thing every Star Ocean does, which I forgot to mention earlier, is the inclusion of bonus dungeons and a level cap exceeding 99. Even though you never needed to get that high for the main story, just knowing that you can get all the way up to 255 was really cool, especially considering most RPGs have you capped out at 99. While the big plot twist had some fans feeling sour, reception of the game overall was pretty solid. It's another fan favorite in the series, right after the second story. Like second story, it was also popular enough to get its own manga as well. With the success of the game, at this point, Star Ocean was considered to be a respectable heavy hitter within the JRPG genre and had fans eagerly awaiting its next mainline entry. Before that though, remakes of the first two games would come out for the PSP in 2008 and 2009. First up, we have First Departure. This is a complete remake of the first game using Star Ocean 2's engine. The sprites are styled similarly, as well as the pre-rendered backgrounds. The battles also play out exactly like Star Ocean 2. They even added an overworld map unlike the original, which does help the pacing and backtracking a bit. Other changes to this version include new party members, new private actions, new endings, new character portraits, a remastered soundtrack, and even voice acting. I know there are some people out there that feel the charm of the original is lost due to the graphic overhaul, and I totally get that, but as a gaming experience, it is more polished overall. First Departure would actually get an enhanced port called First Departure R for the Nintendo Switch in 2019. This version would include sharper visuals, new character art and portraits, again, and new voices, again.
I'll go ask the shopkeeper about them.
You can switch between these new voices and character portraits at will, so that's pretty cool. I was a little harsh on the Super Famicom version of Star Ocean, but I do feel these remakes are pretty good games and well worth playing.
Firestorm Blade! Take this! Shockwave Swirl! Shockwave Swirl!
Were they even trying?
It's over?
Next up, we have Second Evolution. This is largely the same game as Second Story, just with some smaller changes. First of all, there's voice acting during dialogue now, which was not on the original. Second Story had voices during combat, and that was it.
I can't use that strength to protect others. I realize that now.
Kind of a shame though, as the original's voice acting was so bad it was good in like a hilariously cheesy way.
Uh-oh! Burn!
Character portraits have now also been added, along with the new art style in general. I'm pretty mixed about this. I do love the idea of having portraits, I just find the art itself to be vastly inferior to the original. It just looks a lot more generic and lacks a lot of that game's charm. Reina's new art is definitely the worst offender. She's supposed to be 17, but legit looks like 12 years old. Yeah, it pretty much sucks. Her original art's so much better. Some more welcome changes though are the addition of a new party member, Welch, along with new private actions. With that said, probably the biggest change that affects the game is how normal attacks work in battle. There's now a 3-hit combo instead of a single attack, which kind of renders a lot of killer moves useless. It's up to you if this is a good thing or not. The same thing kinda goes for this version in general. The additional content is nice and I did play this a shit ton growing up, but there's just something about the OG version that resonates with me a bit more. And call it nostalgia, whatever. Both versions are excellent and highly worth playing. The next mainline entry in the series we would get would be Star Ocean: The Last Hope in 2009. This was initially released for the 360, however did get an international version for the PS3 the following year. And let me just say, the PS3 version is definitely the one you want to play. There's no annoying disc swapping when traveling to various planets like there was in the 360 version, and you can also add back in the original anime portraits which were not available in that version. These look so much better in my opinion. I was not a fan of those 3D model portraits. What was also a welcome addition to the international version was the inclusion of the Japanese voice acting. I'm not usually one to care about this, but man, the English dub in Star Ocean 4, probably the first time I ever wanted to turn off voices in a game, and I did live through the PS1 era. Some characters are perfectly fine, but Limmel is undoubtedly the worst voiced character I've ever heard in a JRPG. Holy shit do I hate this chick. Every time she was on screen I wanted to slam my head into a wall. This video's coming out right around Halloween, and instead of watching scary movies I just watched clips of her talking to achieve the same effect. The way she says "Kay" at the end of all of her sentences will forever haunt my dreams.
Grandpa knows everything, Kay. Rabby, wait up, Kay. Are you making fun of me?
I think it was supposed to sound cute and endearing, but it ends up coming off as creepy and emotionless. I'm not trying to come down too hard on her voice actor either. Whoever the voice director was clearly didn't do a good job at guiding her. I also found Welch extremely annoying. Some scenes were way too over the top for my liking, with cringy anime tropes. I remember playing this in high school and being embarrassed when my mom walked in during some cutscenes. I do love anime, I just thought this game leaned too much into that wackiness. The previous games had it too for sure, but The Last Hope was just too in your face with it. It's too in your face with a lot of things actually. I mean, the main character's name is Edge Maverick for God's sake. I gave Fate Line God a pass as at least it sounded kinda cool and they did get all cute with the spelling, but Edge Maverick though? Come on, what are we naming Mega Man X bosses here? Might as well just have called him Blade, Renegade, or Ace, Blaster, or something. So yeah, if you couldn't tell, The Last Hope is where I started this sour on the series a bit. It just feels different than the previous games and I didn't like that. That's not to say it's all bad though. The battle system is pretty fun, private actions and item creation make their return, the game looks absolutely gorgeous, and the sci-fi premise is stronger than ever. And probably the thing that this game does best. You control your own ship and can travel to diverse planets, which is really cool and something I wish the series would do more of. While The Last Hope was far from my favorite, it still scored pretty well with 7s and 8s. It was also the top-selling Xbox 360 game in Japan, even beating out Tales of Vesperia. I don't think it's nearly as good as that game, but I digress. I will also say, even though it scored and sold decently, I don't think fan reception was quite as strong as critic reception. Just look online, there are some people that love this game, but there's also a lot that don't. Unfortunately, fan reception, or critic reception for that matter, would not get any better from here. Star Ocean Integrity and Faithlessness would not only hit the PS4 worldwide in 2016, but also the bottom of many people's lists. It received a lot of 5s and 6s and felt very much like a budget title compared to previous entries in the series. The overall production quality is noticeably lower and the lack of cutscenes definitely don't help. It's also like half the length of the previous 3 titles before it. Yeah, not off to a good start, are we? Story-wise, unlike The Last Hope, which was a prequel to the entire series, Integrity and Faithlessness takes place between Star Ocean 2 and Star Ocean 3. You play as Fidel Camus, a fencing instructor from the planet Fakreed, as he finds his life getting turned upside down when he makes contact with an advanced race from space. Unfortunately, despite that, you spend most of the game on undeveloped planets like Star Ocean 1 through 3. That would be alright if the game itself was good, but it's just really not. The battle system is pretty fun, the graphics look great at times, the voice acting is the best in the series, which isn't really saying much. But besides those aspects, it's a step down in quality in basically every other way. To many fans of the series, including myself, we thought this is how we were going out, and it sucked. The franchise seemed all but dead at this point, and hope was fading. But wait, what's that light shining in the distance? Some sort of divine force? Please don't click off this video, it's almost over. Yes, when Divine Force was announced, you could hear celebration everywhere, or at least in a few of us nerds' basements. Regardless, I was ecstatic, but also kind of skeptical. Would it be pretty good like 1, a masterpiece like 2, great like 3, average like 4, or below average like 5? Well, I haven't played it yet as we plan on getting this video out before its release, but alas, life happened. It seems to be getting decent reviews so far though, with a lot of 7s I see, so I'm definitely going to be checking it out myself soon enough. To those that have been playing it, what do you guys think? Also, what's your favorite game in the series? I'm always curious to read opinions like this, so let us know in the comments below. Star Ocean has always been one of my favorite series, but in retrospect, it's really just 2 and 3 that I love, as I'm a little lukewarm about the others. To me, it's just an inconsistent franchise with a cool premise and missed potential. Besides Star Ocean 2, that is. They were on their A-game, firing from all cylinders, and absolutely nailed that one. The PS1 era was the only generation where I felt that Star Ocean was better than the Tales of series, but every other generation besides that, Tales takes the cake, hands down. There's way more titles for one, and the quality is just more consistent. Though with that said, Star Ocean 2 still just might be my favorite game across both franchises, so there's that. And Tales of Symphonia is up there too. I don't know, it's hard to pick. And as always, just want to give a huge thank you to our Patreon supporters, and an extra special shout out to our top patrons, Derek Drost, or Drost, not sure how you pronounce it, sorry, let us know in the comments below, Jesse Spencer, and Jump Rock. All of your generosity and supports is very much appreciated. Other than that, thanks again for watching everyone, and hope you have an awesome day. This is Corbin from Gaming Productions. Until next time.